like Nelson Mandela said, they always say it is impossible until somebody does it.
Yeah.
So Martin Luther King Jr. said, until we learn to live together as brothers, we shall perish as fools.
Yeah.
So you will find that there are some nations in this world. They are multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, but they've learned to live together as one. Before America got into the chaos that it is, it was a perfect example of a melting pot where people, the only original Americans are the Indian Americans. Yeah. Everybody else, including the WASP, the WASP, they all came from outside America. But before they allowed, certain things to get into their heads, they were a very, very good picture of, people from different backgrounds living together as one. So Nigeria is going to take it to the next level. So a new Nigerian is someone who sees other Nigerians, as brothers, as one family, here to do something for humanity that has never been achieved for humanity before. And that's what I call the ultimate human civilization. So
I think you are talking about liberation. I think you said what I was listening to what you said attentively, and I think what you summarize is liberation. That a new Nigeria must be liberated. I guess you would have to define or scale what liberation means, because if you're liberated from tribal thinking, if you're liberated from corruption, if you're liberated from the norms that we are going through now, like bribery and everything,
corruption,
so a new Nigerian needs to be liberated from a certain mindset,
Spot on.
Because if we have said Nigeria, if we have said Nigeria is poised to liberate Africa or even liberate the black man to bring him into a certain way of thinking, that means in alignment with that, the new Nigerian who is going to accept every other person as a Nigerian, accept himself, accept the next man, accept the next tribal person, that person must be liberated from a certain way of thinking. So if we personify that and we create a persona of a liberated individual who happens to be a Nigerian, that could be an ideal Nigerian, that could be a new Nigerian. And then, Chris, if you want to quantify that for us and say, okay, if that is the case, though, how do we now create a mindset of liberation to identify or align with that new Nigerian? You see what I mean? Because we put ourselves as custodians of certain narratives. If we're going to change the narratives, or we're going to change the mindset of people, or we're going to help people realign with certain facts, regardless of what the current situation is, these things are going to happen, right? So if these things are going to happen, and we know for a fact that it will happen, it might happen next week or the week after, or in 3 years' time, or in 2027, this thing will happen, which is a new Nigeria would come through, because this is about how do we now create the aligned mindset of a new Nigerian? If we say Nigeria is poised to liberate Africa on a level, Nigeria is poised to create an individual with a liberated mind. So how do we now start creating that aligned mindset for a new Nigerian? What can we start doing individually to personify, or rather to create a persona of a new Nigerian? It's really a case of how do we create the mindset now for a new Nigerian based on a liberated individual.
Sorry, can I chip in for a second?
Yeah.
I think I said that when we had that space thing a few days ago, about how the things that have sort of evolved have actually made me rethink and change my minds about stuff. I think that we actually need to take into account that those of us in diaspora are almost sort of like a different tribe for Nigerians now. Have you guys thought about that? In conversations I've had with a few of the people, like on Twitter and stuff, there's a girl who was, I mean, she didn't know that I was in diaspora, and somebody was asking one of the sort of governor-elects, I think it's like for the, I don't know, the new one they're doing, it's all very confusing. And she was like, oh, those diasporans are so rude, you know? And I can understand it. Like, those of us who've lived abroad have sort of embraced the idea, and some of us actually left Nigeria because of that fact, that a person deserves respect because they show respect to you, you know, not like sort of traditional Nigerians who think, oh, you know, this person's older than you, therefore automatically, whether they're doing rubbish or not. And really, in speaking to her, I think what sort of rubbed her off was just the fact that this lady who was calling in from New York was very outspoken about, you know, what she was asking this, you know, candidate. And for me, I didn't see anything wrong with it, because like for me, she was asking genuine questions like, what are your plans? What do you plan to do with the swamp? What do you plan to do with the villages, you know? And it makes you sort of step back and think, actually, if it had been, say, what I would call a Nigerian who asked that question, they wouldn't have asked it in the same way. Do you see? And even the candidate was sort of taken aback, you know? And it is something that we will need to consider. And it hadn't occurred to me before. And yes, it did happen to me. Even like I had said before, I hadn't been to Nigeria in 10 years. And then I went last summer. I mean, up to the point that my cousin said to me, she just said, and I just kept this one as a sort of badge of honor. And every time I say something, she'll go, oh, you people and your air-conditioned English. You know, they really do look at us as a different breed. You know, the ideas that we come up with, the things that come out of our mouths, you know, I believe they look at us like we're foreigners. And that is something that we're going to need, because if you look at it now, I was talking to my sister who's in France and a friend as well, who's Taiwanese actually. And I was saying that more and more, I'm looking at the analogy of, if you look at the American slaves, where, you know, you had the house slaves and you had those ones that were out in the field, and how the house slaves felt superior to the ones out in the fields, right? And I can see it in Nigeria now, that Stockholm syndrome. It's there. I've had the arguments. And just imagine, let's just even fast forward and say, okay, you know, just as we'd hoped, you know, the new Nigeria is here, Peter is our president, we've managed to get rid of, you know, a lot of these corrupt people, and those that we didn't get rid of have cooperated to, you know, go the straight and narrow path. It's going to be tough for those of us from diaspora. Do you realize that?
Well, that's why we're here, in terms of setting the tone before we get there. And you see, you're talking about the same thing we just mentioned, which is liberation. We might call it a different name. It might be emancipation of a mindset of mental slavery. It could be that, but it's still a form of liberation, right? So, but what the example you gave is almost perfect, because there are certain things that we out here in diaspora are free to do. Like, for instance, I don't have to put a sir if I'm speaking to somebody, regardless of how old you are. But back home, it's almost like a thing. You don't put it, they think you're disrespectful. But that's a form that needs to be liberated. Once you remove that, you get a new individual altogether. You get a young person who is ready to express themselves without any fear. So that's one thing that we can chip away from the old block. And that's Donkey, I think that's what you're alluding to, because if that continues, the Nigerians coming from different parts of the world, which is going to start happening, is already happening now, they're going to face this blockage in view of collaboration and alignment. Hence, we have all this Nigerian network. But the discussion, or rather the conversation, obviously, is how do we create that aligned mindset of a new Nigerian? Part of it is removing that mental slavery. How are you going to do that? How do you intend to do that? Chris must have a view. Les might have a view. Duncan, obviously you have a view. David might have a view. I might have a view. There might be things that we need to start calling out in terms of removing this, you know, you're chiseling off the old to reveal a new Nigerian. So what are those things? My thing is, if we converse about these things become timeless. When people watch the people listen.
Yeah.
Oh, I can align with that. Oh, that's me. Oh, that's not me, and then they know exactly what this new person is. But until we identify all these ills and bring them out, I don't think they'll be ready for the new Nigeria in the offing. So yeah, you're right. Let's take it back to Chris now. So how would you go about in creating this aligned mindset of a new Nigerian? What are the things we need to start getting rid of? You can align it with what Donke just said, or examples I just gave, or you might have a new approach as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. We're all talking towards achieving the same goal, and that is changing the mindset. Well, one thing is very clear: what you hear every day is what you end up believing in. Yeah. And what you believe in is what you become. Then what you become is what you will produce, and it will just keep producing its own kind. So now, over the years, what we have done is to come up with what we call the new Nigeria content, including the belief system in the new Nigeria, which we tag as the new Nigeria creed. The new Nigeria creed. Maybe I'll forward it to us so that we'll go through it. It's also in the making so that we look at it and fine-tune it. Because when you look at it, you're saying, yeah, this is the Nigeria I want. This is the Nigeria I want. But because there must be a belief. Yes, I'll send it to you.
I mean, is it long? If you can read it out if it's not too long, if you can read it out.
Yeah, it's a bit long.
Okay.
It's a bit long.
Excerpts. Yeah. You can read just a bit of it.
It'd be nice to hear the new
Nigeria.
Yeah. Because
Okay. I know. Okay. Maybe you'll give me a few seconds. I will get it out then.
Yeah, because guys, we are trying to. It's a podcast about that subject matter. How do we create an aligned mindset for a new Nigerian? If we say we have a creed, why not? All we have to do is amplify that creed, and people who find it interesting, boom, you've sorted.
Yeah. Plug into it. Yeah.
You sorted that problem. If we say, Donke was saying, if we say, well, look, people look at us differently, then we have to find out why they look at us differently, and then cut that out of the system. You get a new person entirely.
Yeah.
Especially from the other person's point of view. If I can convince my great aunt in the village that I don't have to call her Teresa all the time. I can say, hey, Teresa, how you doing? Let's have a good time. And that makes her look at me differently and think about me differently. Like she can now relate with me. You've created a new Nigerian right there. If you can convince somebody that stealing is wrong, based on you just being consistent with the approach, you've created a new Nigerian. Now, but the persona of a new Nigerian is what we're after. So a new Nigerian is one that would, like you said, is a liberated being.
Yeah.
That's 100%. They must be liberated from my point of view, liberated to do exactly what it is they want to do in view of progress for the country. And an aligned vision with where the country is going. If we say and agree that Nigeria is poised to liberate Africa on a level, especially from a mental point of view, then as custodians of that narrative, we have to start making sure we are churning out new Nigerians to support that drive, to align with that vision, to align with that mission,